connect my camera. The gospel of success is this new ideology that's developing that's changing what it means to be successful. And the idea is more than just becoming this small farmer, but it's actually having money. And the level of success is now more and more how much wealth you have. And this fits in with that idea I mentioned with the West about the individual. Sink or swim on their own, they could do it. And part of this, and it would become a myth, would be Horatio Alger. He would write a series of books, and then others would write these same kind of books with the same name. And the term is, I'm sure you've all heard this before, rags to riches. And these are almost always young boys who start out poor and impoverished with nothing, and through their pluckiness and ingenuity and creativity, they become rich and successful. And there's going to be a lot dealing with the West, becoming rich out in the West, which ties in with that mythology of the individual in the West. And this would be pushed on people that if you show enough creativity and gumption, you can become rich and luck. And if you don't become rich, whose fault is it? And if it's your own fault, then why should we ever help you? And this would begin the myth of the self-made man. On their own, no one to help them. This would be a big issue in the 2012 and 2016 election. The idea was, how do you become rich? And yeah, there is an element of truth about the individual. But as I mentioned with laissez-faire economics, where actually they would do huge amounts of government aid to things like railroads and other businesses, or for that matter, there's all kinds of things that help people outside of your own ability. Or what else about this that nobody wanted to talk about is that, well, how did most people get rich? They do it the same way. Yeah, that's how most people have wealth. They inherit it. They inherit it. That's the old-fashioned way. And does that mean you're a self-made man because you inherited a lot of money? And there's a lot of contradictions in here. But who likes this concept? Who wants to push this idea? People with a lot of wealth. People with a lot of wealth really like this. And that's what you have to get down. This be pushed by the wealthy. This be pushed by them. I made it by my own ingenuity. So you do it yourself, sink or swim on your own, and since I made it on my own, why should I help you? And it's not so much an individual help, but we're talking about politics, where real help and real change can happen is in government, and this is saying, why should government ever help other people? Yes.
So I get like the connotation of like, why should I help you? But it was it also like, if I help you, what favors am I doing? You're supposed to be like a self-made man.
What do you mean, like what favor?
Like, I feel like the perspective you said, like they were trying to form my question. Like it was looked as a bad thing to like, you know, like why should I help you? I was able to do this all by myself.
Yeah.
But was it also like, if I help you, I'm only hurting you because you're supposed to be this self-made man?
And we're coming to that. That's a really good point. The idea is you got to do it on your own. Or there's another way to look at it. If I help you, what will you do with it?
Compete with you.
No, you're jumping even more insidious than that. And we're coming to the concept, and this is where we get to it, social Darwinism. And social Darwinism would become the most dominant philosophy at the end of the 19th century, and it is still today the most dominant philosophy in the world, by far. Social Darwinism permeates every part of our society. And who invented it? Would that be a hint? What do you think Charles Darwin felt about this? He despised it and hated the fact that his name was put to it. He saw it a toxic, horrific philosophy. But Herbert Spencer was a wealthy aristocrat in England, lived near Manchester, and actually wasn't as wealthy, his family wasn't as wealthy as they once were because industrialists started to get more and more of the wealth. But still, he led a life of luxury. And part of what he was doing is looking at this society as, why are some people on top and why are some people on the bottom? And the big thing is, he didn't want to say, I'm on top because I just happened to win the birth lottery. You know, I lucked out, my parents were rich. You know, I very well could have been born to poor parents. He didn't want that. He didn't want a random chance. And the other thing he didn't want is he didn't want anybody to come and say, People are on top because, or people on the bottom because they're being exploited, and we got to make things equal. Do things like let poor people vote, let women vote, start taxing wealth. No, he didn't want that. He wanted to continue laissez-faire. He didn't want poor people to vote. He didn't want women to vote. He didn't want wealth to be taxed. He didn't want anybody to look into how they make money. He didn't want restrictions on any of that. So he wanted to come up with a philosophy that would continue the basic same thing going. And he was very isolated. This is a classic example of somebody in an ivory tower. You know, he's looking at the world from a very limited perspective. He had not really seen how the poor live in nearby Manchester, England, in absolute misery as they worked in the factories there. He didn't see that. He just saw it as, okay, there are rich people and poor people, and people like me are really nice people. So, because they're all like me, and I want to keep going on this. I can't emphasize that enough. They want to make sure we don't have to pay any more taxes. I don't want to pay any taxes. I want to keep rich. So, he is trying to come up with a reason. And have you ever heard of divine right? Who thought they had divine right to rule? Who thought? What does divine right mean? Who thought they had that? Monarchs and nobilities. So it fits in there, but they wanted a more science-like explanation. This was a science, even though it wasn't the scientific revolution, there was a revolution in science personified by 1851. Just as Spencer is coming up with these ideas, who wrote The Origin of Species? Charles Darwin. And Darwin wrote this and laid out his concept of natural selection, which is not really evolution, but we all say it's evolution. It's not really that. And the thing was, Darwin was writing this in competition with others. He just beat two others. In fact, one was about ready to publish a book that said almost the same thing. And Darwin, who was going to make this massive treatise, quick came out with a summary to beat him. And just barely beat him, and that's why we remember Darwin. And the thing we have to know about this was, this ties into the Industrial Revolution. For 75 years before Darwin wrote this, there had been a revolution in thought triggered by the Industrial Revolution, but not because just of all the production we were making in science. They were digging canals, they were digging more mines than ever before, and there's more global trade because of what happened with Columbus and the Portuguese going around Africa, that the world was more connected. They're seeing more flora and fauna and animals they had not seen in Europe. They didn't know about. But think about digging all the canals. Think about more mining for coal and iron and other minerals and gold. What did they discover? Fossils. Now, they had discovered fossils before, but since they didn't know about what was going on in the rest of the world, and there weren't that many, there wasn't mining that much, they just put it off as animals we don't see because they live in other parts of the world. Remember I told you they thought dinosaurs lived in the Americas? That's one of the things Lewis and Clark thought they were going to find. So they just assumed, you know, they're over there. But as they dig all these and realize they're not around anymore, this not only set up a religious crisis, but also a scientific crisis. Where are the animals? How did that happen? How could they find animals that clearly were similar to animals that were around, but there had been changes? Or animals that live today in the world, in Europe, that have obvious relatives, but significantly different in certain ways. There's something else I discovered, especially mining coal. And coal, you know, coal is the idea of, you know, basically plant life and animal life being pressed down over maybe 2 or 3 years of pressure. Joking, but creating coal. So when they're starting to dig coal at a couple places, the best known is right near Orange, France. Mountains right here near the Rhone River. They're digging through an area that had peat. You know what peat is? And every year there's a nice layer, kind of mossy peat. Then the next year there's another layer over the top. Next year another layer. And that's great for coal. So when they're digging down into this, what did they discover? Each line was a new years of peat. They started counting. And near Orange is over 1 million years. And they realized something. The Earth was significantly older than what they thought. And the thing was, they weren't alone in that. There are places all over this is happening. The realization the Earth is really old. And what are these fossil things? And so they were not alone with this concept of natural selection. But natural selection would explain a combination of, over an immense period of time. And what is natural selection? That some species do what? Have what? Breed? Well, yeah. Yeah, they find some adaptation that will allow them to survive in what? In a changing environment. Because there are all kinds of shifting environments, and they can adapt. The animals that the parts of that species that do not have that adaptation, they died off. And the ones who can adapt go on. And those adaptations that will go in that species, and then they might have to adapt again. And that's natural selection. It's not that they are stronger animals. It's not that they're smarter. It's not that they're faster. It's just that they can adapt. That's natural selection. Darwin was not alone, but he beat everyone to the punch, so we associate that with natural selection. So, this changing environment, some species can adapt and change, some can't. And there's one more thing about that. That doesn't mean that animals are somehow evolving or changing. Monkeys are not evolving into humans. Slugs are not evolving into dogs. There's no hierarchy of life. It's just some animals survive and some don't. Some adaptations survive. Humans or monkeys are not evolving into humans. Humans and monkeys, or humans and apes have common ancestors, and by natural selection, they broke off. I have to say that because there's a common belief that there's a hierarchy, which we'll come back to, that they're evolving up. You ever seen that picture where they show like a monkey, like an ape, and it goes up to a human? That's not evolution at all. At all. It's that we have common ancestors. And it's natural selection. But Spencer read this, and it was Eureka. If that happens in the environment, maybe that explains why in society we have some people on top and some people on bottom. It's natural selection in society. But he gave it a name that he was already coining with, and now people think Darwin said this. Spencer coined the term the survival of the fittest, implying that the strongest and smartest and most morally upright are on top. That also implies that there's a hierarchy. There's people on top and bottom. And in fact, this will so bastardize evolution that a lot of people do believe that there's like a hierarchy of life, that humans are on top and all the animals are kind of like evolving up to it, which is not at all what natural selection is. You hear people all the time say, I didn't evolve from a monkey. Well, no one did. But that's not natural selection. But once you say the fittest are on top, it's natural that he is born wealthy because he's supposed to be. He's on top. And the big thing is, and it's brought up right away, well, yeah, but there are really strong and intelligent people that are poor. Why? There's got to be another part, and this is a key element of it, that they are weak. The weak are morally corrupt. There is something immoral about them, something wrong in their moral fiber that says they are not poor. And so people say this all the time to this day. People are impoverished because there must be something lacking within them. There must be something wrong with them. And by the way, if there's something morally corrupt about the poor, what happens if you give them money? And they're morally corrupt. What will they do? Does anybody know what vice is? What's vice? You know? Yeah, but actually it's a criminal term. So even it's like a bad habit, or they literally call it a sin crime. So vice are things like drinking, gambling, drugs, prostitution would be one, things like that. And so the idea is you give money to the poor, and what will they do with it? Because they're already morally corrupt. They won't use it to better themselves. What will they do? Waste it, drink it, drink the money. Well, they could put it in a blender, but the point is, who likes this idea? They even invited him some of the wealthiest people in the world. Two of the sons of the Vanderbilt, of Cornelius Vanderbilt, the newly wealthy Andrew Carnegie, Jay Gould, the financier and crook, brought him over to New York as kind of like this patron saint. And he came over, and they took him to the poorest area of New York City, called the Five Points. And they led him around like, look, this is exactly what you said. They're weak and morally corrupt, and look how they live. And Spencer, who had been pretty isolated, looked at them. Hell of the 5 Point areas of New York. Absolute hell that people were living in. And he's just like, no, that's not what I meant. I didn't used to treat human beings like this. And how do they react? His benefactors. So they sent him back to England. It's true. How dare you? We want you to say, don't feel guilty about how bad they lived and you have your mansion. Don't feel guilty. That's what they wanted. So Spencer, who would create the survival of the fittest, in reality does not have as much influence as his American successor, William Graham Sumner. And Sumner, most famously in his book, Both Ways, but all through the end of the 19th century, he had no moral qualms. And what he said was, life is an endless struggle, but the struggle for society is different. It's in the market. Every person is in the marketplace, whether they are in the labor market, the housing market, the food market, or in the market of different competitors selling stuff. We're all in the market, and we're in the struggle. And it's natural selection. Some people are on top because they adapt to the changing market, and some people aren't. And if you're not, that is the way it's supposed to be. That is natural. The market is natural. It is supposed to be this way. They're poor because they're supposed to be poor. They're rich because they're supposed to be rich. And therefore, any intervention in the government, like saying to break up monopolies or to ensure higher wages or better working conditions, or things like food safety or environmental safety, is folly. It will not work because it is unnatural. So either it won't work or it'll blow up this beautiful system we have. And so there should only be help for whom? Yeah. If the government or those who are meant to be successful, and that means who's meant to be, those people are on top. Government should help them. That's why all those things like government aid and everything else was a good thing. Government should help the wealthy. Then the wealthy will ensure prosperity, and they will drag the poor up kicking and screaming. You help them and they'll waste it. And this is the dominant philosophy today. And it's also very appealing to people who are doing well, because then it allows them to think, I'm better than other people. I'm better. And this is something that I've taught AP classes for a very, very, very long time. And just starting to add up all the years, over 20 years now. And I've noticed that that's pretty prevalent amongst AP students. You know, they work hard, know the game, they're smart, and I really do respect you, but there's also sometimes people who will get the attitude, yeah, I'm pretty cool with other people, other classes. Yeah, I must be smarter. I know none of you would ever think that, but the other classes do. I mean, we should all think that we're all better, right? And it is pretty nice when someone says you're better. Because what do you want to think? You're right. I am pretty cool. Couldn't it work for races? It's no coincidence that the most racist time in world history would be when social Darwinism come into play. So get that down. Race. One race must be better. And what race? Well, boy, you people of European descent seem to have all the money and the power in the industry. Why do they have it? Not because a whole series of events that include things like the horse and cattle and better food. No, it must be that they're better. Couldn't it also work for, and get this down, sex? Men are on top, and women are inferior and subservient because men must be better. And not just society. Now that we have scientific evidence called social Darwinism, is this science? Not at all. Social Darwinism is science-y. It kind of sounds like science, but actually, one of the big complaints Darwin had with this was that Darwin looked at it and said, humans have choices. We're not the environment, and we're not slugs. We have choices to make how we treat each other. In fact, if you take social Darwinism and this idea that we're all little individuals in the market, all in competition and struggle, and some people are on top, some people are on the bottom, to its most logical and pretty terrifying extreme, what ideology do we have? No, the exact opposite. Fascism and Nazism. In fact, that's why I said social Darwinism is the most dominant philosophy today, but people don't like saying it because people don't like that connection to Nazis. But it's social Darwinism. And what is the opposite? If you believe in equality, it's socialism. And communism is a form of socialism. Socialists are like totally fight against social Darwinism. And that's part of the reason Charles Darwin hated this. He was a socialist. And he despised this philosophy. But and so his name is going to be stuck with it. This is a big deal. I mean, this is huge. What a great way to justify a system that helps some and not others, because you could say, I don't have to help them. They're just wasted. And that's where we get to, we have to get to this, the gospel of wealth. Andrew Carnegie would come up with this idea. And part of the reason was he believed in social Darwinism. He also believed that a certain Anglo-Saxon, aka British race, was superior. And wealth is good. It's God's blessing. It proves that God loves us. This should remind you of the Puritans. This is self-determination, or not self-determination, predestination. And here's the deal. Carnegie did everything he could to drive wages down, worked his workers. He, in fact, only gave them 2 days off a year, 4th of July and Christmas. And Sundays. 2 days represents a 6-day work week, 12 hours a day. Broke their union to push their pay down as much as possible. And he felt kind of guilty about it. He thought, well, it's natural because of social Darwinism. People are living lives of misery. And I did it to them. I want to go to heaven. That wasn't real. I mean, he really thought in that way. How do I do whatever it takes to get rich and still go to heaven? And so social Darwinism fits, but he took it to the next step. But then, I'm supposed to get as much money as possible. That's God's blessing. But then what do I do with it? Oh, almost got one more thing. And inequality is natural. And that fits in with social Darwinism. There is a hierarchy. I should have a social Darwinism when I mentioned the Nazis. If inequality is natural, don't you think eventually, okay, I mean, some people should be on top and some people should be on bottom. And if we have a hierarchy, eventually get to that one person on top, the leader. What title would Hitler give himself, meaning the leader? Der Führer means the leader. And that is the ultimate expression of social Darwinism. So, with this, philanthropy. I accumulate wealth because I'm supposed to, and then I give it back in charity. Philanthropy. But here's the thing. What kind of philanthropy? If I give higher wages to my workers, they'll just waste it. They don't know what they're doing. Sure, some might be smart enough, but not all. If I give direct aid to the poor, as he called it, what does slothful mean? Lazy. I'm always fascinated by higher wages to people working 12 hours a day in a steel mill, and you call them lazy.
Yeah, you are not really doing
Even if he was doing a lot, it's certainly not the back-breaking work. But you know, or like they'll just waste it. They haven't earned it. And so if you give them money, they'll either waste it or they'll quit working. Because they have no work ethic because they're unworthy and they'll just sit on their butts and just collect the money. And that's pretty normal thought today. That was the argument that the Trump administration used when they were desperately trying to cut food stamps. They just wasted food stamps, college aid, scholarship aid, hot lunch programs. Yeah, they want to cut it all. And their argument was this. So like I said, this is a very dominant philosophy today. It did not happen because of the way Congress functions, but that's what they wanted to do. But the wealthy, they know better. Why do they know better? Because they're the ones who are wealthy. So they will take this wealth that they earned, however, and help their poor brethren. I like how he put that. But you can't give them direct aid. So what would he build? Well, if there are some people like him who wasn't desperately poor when he started out, how did they get out of this poverty? I helped them discover their own initiative. He built, and they still do fund, thousands of libraries, including the ones here in Helen. Libraries. So they can have access to the material, then they can do it themselves. Or he would build opera houses, where the idea of the big opera house in Pittsburgh, where the workers could get off done with a 12-hour shift and then take their family to the opera to get their children associated with the culture and therefore move up. Which I'm trying to think after 12 hours in a still, no, I want to go to the opera. Especially when you have no bathing facilities or food or that kind of thing, but that's irrelevant. But that's how he looked at it. The idea is, I know better. And we can see this today. Where some of the very rich, they give a lot of money away. He didn't have to give anything away. So let's be clear about it. He didn't have to give any of it. But the idea is, I will decide what's best for you. So it's very much a hierarchy. A really good example is Bill Gates. You know Bill Gates is. And they give hundreds of millions of dollars away. But they decide what's good. For example, he never went to public school, yet he decided what's best for public school. If you like Common Core, it's Bill Gates. That was Bill Gates 100%. If you don't like Common Core, that's Bill Gates. In fact, he put his money and influence behind it and got the Obama administration to agree to it. They didn't even have it designed. It was just an idea. It was basically a paragraph. They didn't even know what it was. That, I'm not a fan of that. But he didn't give anything but his idea, I know what's best for you. All right, so, social gospel, good place to stop. The market is natural. Oh, I should add. So we mentioned conservative and liberal economics. Social Darwinism fits in there, doesn't it? The more you believe in social Darwinism, are you conservative or liberal? Social Darwinism, by definition, is conservative. By definition. Now, it doesn't mean you have to go all the way to. No, it's not saying that people are conservative or Nazis. Not at all. It's just saying the more social Darwinistic are you, more conservative. You skipped Friday. Didn't you? But you got the notes? I know, it's yeah. No, I just thought you were gone. You got the notes. Were you hurt?
Why is it so like this? Oh my God.
We got a test today. Clear desk, test day. Special topic is a 2-day test. So, over finals, I'm putting the sign up. I'm so excited.
Are you gonna just replace?
Yeah. It's kind of sad, but that was really cool. But now it's laminated. But I got a little extra time. Actually, I'm gonna have like 3 students in my study hall that are just they can't go home. So I'm gonna let them. Are you gonna be here? Yeah. So I'm gonna have you do it. Put the sign up.
I think this one has better quality.
If you have work, don't worry. It's like Dixieland. I'll show you how to do it. It's science.
With a ton. So if you find like with the gallery, you could.
I know. I don't want to get that out. Maybe I should find another place.
How long has the ending been sticking there?
I can't remember. I can't remember who gave this. I think it was Emma Brown. The aliens would shoot like 10 feet. But I thought it was funny sticking it on there. Happy birthday, Sophie!